Well, welcome to the second episode of UC Analytics Unleashed. My name, as always, as in episode one, is Kevin Keeler, and I'm joined, as always, by Christopher Martini, who I understand is battling some potential internet issues. So,
Oh, a battle as old as time itself, Kevin, right? The old saying, the best laid plans of mice and men can sometimes be ruined by your cable company,
yes, exactly,
right?
and it turns
Classic,
out
timeless.
There's yeah, and it turns out, Christopher, that I am actually on the West Coast, so I am now doing the 8 a.m. shift. I was
See?
attending WebEx1, so here I am, and I'm also using the hotel internet. So hopefully this
Perfect.
will work
Fingers
out well
crossed.
for us. So on
Yeah,
the
fingers
second,
crossed.
yeah, there you go. So on the second episode, we wanted to talk, about specifically licensing. I mean, the episode "License to Thrive." So um, that's a key part of optimizing your cost from an analytics perspective. And I know, Christopher, you have dealt with many customers and many service providers. And from your experience, what percentage of those organizations would you say are properly licensed?
I think it depends on how strict we want to be with our definition of the word properly licensed,
Okay.
right? But I think from a concept standpoint, they a lot of organizations believe, hey, we looked at the number of people that we have, and then we got the number of licenses, right, that
Right.
that we needed. And if you look at it through the lens of, do the numbers add up to the number of people, which is sometimes, kind of the baseline for the discussion, you'd be looking at a fairly high percentage, right? The IT departments are smart. They're doing due diligence. They want to do the best they can with the money, right, that they get for their IT budget. But when
Right.
you really start to dig into the details, not just of licenses owned, but what are we actually consuming? What are we utilizing? What do the adoption rates look like? COVID, right? Again, a consistent theme. That remote work piece kind of took a lot of people out of the purview of the IT department, right? You're not seeing them every day. It's a little tougher to get an idea of what's on those machines. So I think the licensing discussion and the numbers associated with that uh, also face that challenge, right? That the same way that the IT department had to struggle to kind of figure out where everyone is, they struggle a little bit with trying to figure out where all the licenses are as well.
Yeah, and I see my video makes me look like I'm a ghost, but I am not a ghost. But
It's almost
what
like Back to the Future, like someone went back in time and they disrupted one
oh,
thing, right? And from the
oh
movie, you're
no,
slowly fading as I talk to you. They
yeah,
disrupted the continuum that included Kevin Keeler in it.
yeah, that's I better I better go back and make sure my dad met my
Correct that.
mom. There you
Yeah,
go.
make sure Biff.
Yeah. What I would say is talk about going off on a tangent. What
Right.
I would say is especially, in the Microsoft environment where, there's more kind of the licensing seems to get more complicated. Right now you've got Teams Phone, which is often an additive license to E3s. You've got Teams Premium. You have this new Copilot licensing, which that's not really available yet for general availability. So but certainly what I see is organizations that are significantly over licensed
Oh
from
yeah.
the adoption perspective, especially around things like the either the Teams Premium or the phone system license, because organizations might assume everybody's going to make PSTN calls, make or receive PSTN calls, and when you look at adoption, and I think we talked earlier about the difference between usage, which is more about minutes and the number of calls, but
Hmm.
adoption, which is who's using a particular service, like that's really the key thing to tie to phone system licenses, because if somebody's never making or receiving a phone call, they don't require a phone system license. And I have seen organizations that are substantially over licensed, or the other scenario, and then I'm going to ask you if Boss Insights can help with this, is organizations that are moving, let's say, from one platform, right? They're moving from their on-prem platform, whether that's, Avaya or Cisco,
Yeah, it
they're moving.
could be anything.
Right, and they're moving to Teams, and so for a period of time, they give everybody both licenses, but then, maybe they're not sure when to turn off licenses. And if it's a big organization that takes a long time to migrate, they may be paying for, as opposed to drawing down on one side as they ramp up on the other side, they may definitely be overpaying for licenses. So now this is the problem. Um, does Voss Insights, your analytics product, does that help,
Yeah,
especially in that more complicated environment? And how does it help?
I would say before you even get there,
Right.
right? Before you even get to that point, one of the mistakes that you see oftentimes is the organization is so concerned, right? They're so concerned about, we've had the same system in place, right? We've delivered voice the same way for the last X number of years. We haven't really had any issues. Of course, you might have a line down or something, but by and large, the system works and people are used to working this way. So a lot of times the discussion about the migration starts with kind of a flawed premise that the existing system is meeting the needs and doing it in the right way and appropriately sized and shaped for the new platform. So
Okay.
oftentimes they look at it and think, well, we've always had this number of DIDs and we're not getting rid of any
Hmm.
people. So moving to this new platform, we should probably have roughly the same number. And this is the way that we've always had the system set up for things like hunt groups, right? And auto attendance. These are the things, this is the way that it's set up. So a lot of times the customer starts with, can you help me recreate this in the new platform?
I see. Just
And
replicate what you have.
correct.
Okay.
Correct. We need to have this, right? This is what we have today. So in order to continue to do business the way that we do today, we need to have this in the future. Well, that's a flawed premise because you shouldn't be striving to get onto this new platform so that you can continue to do business the same way that you've always done business, right? If you're
Right.
going to go through the disruption of migrating to a new phone system, which is wrought with challenges from beginning to end, right? You're going to go through all of this stuff. Why would you just build the same old thing that you had? So the first piece is not, can we get a view into the existing system? Of course, our Migrate product can do that, but is there any thoughtful analysis of what lives in that system, right?
Right.
Someone works on an open floor plan office, and the way that it's always happened is the telephone rings for one person. If they don't pick up in 3 rings, it goes to the other people on the floor. Somebody loses their job, they disconnect that, or retires, right, for whatever reason, they disconnect that desk phone, so that thing doesn't ring anymore.
Right.
And if that phone number, license, all of the stuff in the background doesn't get deprovisioned, just because you don't hear it ring doesn't mean that you're not paying for it, right? Every single month, month after month. So when we start to think about the migration and building out the new environment, before we even get to, let's take a look at what's going on that platform, we do a thoughtful analysis of the existing platform and try to help inform some of those decisions so you're not wildly overspec'd, right? You don't have 2,000 licenses that you don't need. Once you get there, I agree, the challenge for an organization that's migrating is, how do you keep your eye on both sides of that
Right.
equation, right? There are good tools from your existing platform. You've been living on those tools for years in most cases. There are great tools from the platform that you're moving to. If the only thing that you care about is that platform, and maybe the only thing that you care about are things like license counts, right? And how many have been assigned. But if you really want to dig into the detail and be able to prevent that side-by-side view, you need an analytics product that can tie those views together for you. And certainly with Insights, that's one of the key value props, right? Is the ability to bring those things together side by side. But beyond that, it's it's not just about do the counts match up, right? To your
Right.
point earlier, there's a difference between usage, consumption, adoption, all of those things are kind of nuanced topics, and within them, I think that's where the big savings can be, right? Not just do we have the right number of licenses for the number of people? Let's look what people are actually doing with those licenses, and does it make sense for us to continue to be licensed the way that we are?
Yeah, no, those are great points. And the one thing I want to expand on, because I was thinking about this, like you've shared some case studies where Voss has gone into organizations, and I've seen some of the Voss Insight dashboards that you've created specifically for
For
these larger
cost analytics.
organizations.
Yeah.
Yeah, and they show dollars, and I was just thinking about any of the native tools, whether it's WebEx Control Hub or Teams Admin Center, or
Uh,
I don't think that they actually, any
no,
of the
they're not
vendors
looking at the
are.
dollars. They're
No,
not
they
looking
don't.
at the
Yeah,
dollars and cents. And it's not because, like, from a Microsoft standpoint, and that's where a majority of my background lies. From a
right.
Microsoft standpoint, they don't want you to buy licenses that you don't use and don't
Of
need,
course.
right?
Right.
From their perspective, they want you to buy a ton of licenses, but they want you to get 2 tons of value out of
Right.
that license purchase. So they know if you're buying all of these expensive SKUs and you're E5 to the gills across the board, and people aren't using those licenses, it's a really difficult renewal talk, right? It's a really
Yeah.
difficult discussion when you want them to adopt new technologies from you as a vendor. So our entire view is, how do we maximize value? One way that you maximize value is by controlling cost. So let's take a look at that. And to your point, we've had large organizations like 20,000, over 20,000 seats. We've helped save over $1 million, like real
Yeah.
dollars,
That's
right?
yeah.
The kind of thing that sets a CFO's heart aflutter, right? You're not coming in as the IT department and looking for an additional spend or an additional expense. You're coming in and reporting out, hey, those budgetary numbers, I think we're going to look pretty good because we just uncovered this expense and we're able to recoup these costs. I mean, it's a really powerful discussion to be able to have.
Yeah, no, that's, I mean, those are material numbers, that,
Real
and
money,
especially
real
real
money.
real money. It's not that
Yeah,
like
it's
save.
one thing, like if you think about the justification path for a new UC platform, there's a tendency to talk about soft dollar productivity gains, right? There's,
Right.
hey, if we have this, we can engage with customers this way, and I believe that, right? I'm fully bought in on, if you are a digital business, right, that
Right.
there are huge benefits to customer engagement and the way that you work with partners and the way that you communicate with your own employees, right? There's a ton of upside. Putting dollars next to those gains is really challenging to do in a way that passes muster with everybody in the approvals process. But when you
Right.
get to the point where you're really starting to talk about, we're spending X and we can reduce that by this amount month over month, every single month, get rid of those licenses today. We don't need to pay for those DID. We can stop paying for those things. It's an amazing discussion to be part of.
Yeah, no, absolutely, because those, as you say, those are hard dollars as opposed to theoretical productivity savings. The
Yeah.
other area that I wanted to explore, because we're working with an organization right now where is calling plans. So Microsoft, this is very Microsoft specific, but
Yeah.
calling plans have a whole bunch of different minutes attached to them at different rates. So we're working with one organization that just bought everybody the original calling plan had 3,000 pooled minutes. And I don't know how many PSTN calls you make, but I make
Yeah.
very little, and I certainly don't
Yeah.
make 3,000 minutes
3,000
worth.
minutes. It's a
And
lot.
and now over time, I think a lot of organizations don't understand that there's a 120-minute license, there's a pay as you go license. And so, right sizing. So sometimes it's not just about assigning a license. There are complexities in terms of right sizing a license. I mean, is that as well? Kind of the Voss insights, and
Well,
you
how
could.
how do you know which one of those plans you should pick,
Right.
right? Because who, for the last several years or several months or several weeks, has been paying attention to how many minutes they're spending on PSTN calls, right? I'm not monitoring that. I don't know of an IT department that is thinking when they're migrating, hey,
Right.
let's take a thoughtful look at that data. That's another area where Voss steps in and says, we don't need those to be estimates, right? That's not something that you need to estimate. That's
Right.
something where we can look at historical data in many cases and use that historical data that we access either via our Migrate tool or Insights. We use that historical data to inform the licensing decision moving forward. And that's really the way every part of this process should work, right?
Right.
Your licensing spend is not static, right? The same way that your employee headcount is rarely static year over year, the budgets are rarely static year over year. That licensing spend is a moving target, right? And it should be continuously reviewed. Are we appropriately licensed for the way that we're doing business today? What are the investments that we're making in our business going forward, and do we think that those investments will sustain, that licensing will sustain those investments? I think that's an area where Voss really shines, right? Being able to add that thoughtful element, not just to the migration itself, right? And
Right.
eliminate issues via automation. There's a bunch of great things that you can do, but having a single view of reality, right? These are actually the number of minutes that we're consuming. These are actually the DIDs that are placing and receiving calls, right? Just because it's assigned to a person doesn't mean, to your point, that that person's in a position where they really need to be licensed the way that they are, right? A lot of times it's, do we have how many unassigned licenses do we have in our license pool, and how many employees
Right.
do we have? And those numbers look reasonable, but I mean, that's just a very basic view of the world, and it's not terribly valuable, right? You really need to dig in below that to find out what's going on.
So would it be fair to say, I mean, I'm hearing, the Voss approach is more of a bespoke, kind of a customized approach, right? Because, I mean, I think everybody knows there's a lot of analytics products available. Um,
Yeah,
but it sounds like, you know, if I want to drill down, then I'm going to work with Voss, and you're going to create some custom dashboards, and probably I'm a good match for Voss Insights if I'm a little larger, kind of certainly if I'm a multi-platform organization, but it's just not like, okay, out of the box, take it or leave it. If I know that I want to look at a specific area of cost and optimize costs there, it sounds like that's a really good match for Voss. Is that fair to say,
yeah.
Christopher?
So we thrive. Voss thrives in complexity,
Okay.
right? Just because you're a large organization doesn't mean you're a complex organization. And just because you're a smaller organization doesn't necessarily mean that you have simple infrastructure and simple needs.
Right.
So really what we're looking for is, do you have a level of complexity that requires some additional understanding? So for us, and really for any product in this category, right, if you look across the board, the features and functionality generally fall into three buckets. The first bucket is, these are the things that you can do when you take the product out of the box. That out of the box functionality, it lives there, and plug it in and it works. The second bucket is, these are the things that you can do with this product with a little bit of effort, right? Quote unquote, a little bit of effort, right? You put
Right.
a little bit of effort in, you can get this out of it. The third bucket are roadmap items. These are things that we all agree should be baked into the product. We're working on building those things are coming. Where I think Voss really excels and really separates itself from the competition is in that middle chunk, the with a
Okay.
little effort piece. Because A, we're thinking about this all the time, right? As an IT organization, getting into analytics, especially cost analytics, if you're not thinking about it every day, if you're not seeing the examples from a wide customer base, you might have a very narrow view of how cost analytics can help your organization. The experts from Voss can come in and sit with you and thoughtfully go through, this is what we see, right? Here's the way other organizations like yours are approaching that same problem. Hey, here's something we did for an organization of a similar size, and we found 3 buckets of savings for them, and those buckets looked basically like this. And then that middle bucket of a little bit of effort with Voss, our goal is not, hey, buy this product and we can live happily ever after on a long list of professional service engagements. That's not the goal. The goal is to enable the customer to understand how to make those connections for themselves, right? I said last time, it's like you're trying to help them see around corners. Once they start to understand the logic of it, I think it's easy for customers to go and say, oh, we should connect this data point and that data point. And provided they're coming from systems that that help, right? There's an API or some kind of file that you can access. Those things can be relatively straightforward engagements, right? But it really is about, do you have that thoughtful foundation of what cost analytics look like, how it can be applied to an organization your size? What are the best practices? Like what is the forward-thinking organization looking at for data? Now, that might not work in your environment, right? You might be on a legacy system in this case that doesn't easily connect. Finding the right footing for cost analytics, that's another area where Voss can come in and kind of help you through the weeds a little bit, find the footing that works for your organization.
Well, I think that's a great summary of where Voss is a good fit. I know there's more information at vosssolutions.com. Just put the
Absolutely.
URLs there. I know as well people can reach out to you on LinkedIn, and that's great. I think let me just bring up the where is the what are we talking about next time? That is okay. So there.
Maximizing efficiency.
And
Can't wait.
we will also have better internet connection. Hopefully I'm going to go back into the past and
Yeah.
make sure that I
Yeah.
survive into next week. But
solve that problem.
Yeah, no,
I can't believe mine worked for the entire time. Fantastic.
Yeah, there was a little choppy audio, so if you've been listening to this or if you're watching it afterwards, I'm going to be interested to see how LinkedIn does with the live captioning. Maybe it's going to go, I don't know
we'll
how
see.
We'll see how that's set. Yeah. So, but thank you for your time. I think that this is important, as you said. I mean, these are real dollar savings that if you're a complex organization, whether you're small or large, certainly this is something to look into. And I look forward to talking to you next week, Christopher.
Yeah, can't wait, Kevin. Can't wait. Look forward to it.
There you go. So Thursday, November 2nd, 8 a.m. I'll be back in Eastern time. It'll be 8 a.m. for you and 3 p.m. in London. Thanks and bye for now.
Yeah, cheers, Kevin.